Bob,
Yes.
do you happen to know if this recording will go up immediately after the session is over or a couple of days?
I think it's available tomorrow.
Okay. One of the reporters wanted to know who couldn't make it to.
Okay. Yeah, just ask him, tell him to send an email to me and Josh.
Okay.
Hello again, Bob.
Michael.
Hi, everybody. Hi,
Hello.
Rachel. Hi, Michael. Hi, Bob. Hi, Cora.
Hello. Glad to be here again as a guest.
So let me just see among the attendees if there's anyone I recognize that needs to be elevated. Lonnie Irvin. Bob, are you able to elevate people to panelist?
Yeah, I'll do that for a few minutes and then I have to gotta go to the other meeting, but I see Leilani's name twice, but let me try.
Yeah, I don't, yeah. And let me just see if Jim Coughlin is up. Valerie Smith also at the end. So once you leave, who will have control?
I'll make you the host. Do you want anyone to be a co-host?
Yes, Adam Zeldin.
Okay.
And also, can you tell me how one turns off the chat?
I don't know how to do that. I've never done that. Sorry.
I mean, you know how to do it, I think, because you did it the other night, or someone did it.
If someone did it, it wasn't me.
Hi. So I cannot do it. Josh did it.
Josh did it. Hi, Adam. Adam, do you know how to turn off the chat? Jim Coughlin is on, so we need to, oh, can you elevate Jim Coughlin?
One
Do you
second.
see Molly Park? Hi, how are you guys?
Hi, guys. We'll get everyone elevated promptly. So Jim Coughlin, is it Coughlin or Coughlin? I'm calling it Coughlin. Jim, you can correct me. Okay, he's done. And who did you say, Leilani?
Molly Park and Yvonne Ballard.
So Molly Park.
And
Wait till she's up. There you go. And Yvonne, I don't see Yvonne.
I don't know.
Unless she's under, is she under a Leilani Irvin? Is that
That's
possible?
possible.
Can you elevate the second, the second Leilani Irvin? Hey, Adam, do you know how to turn off the chat? You're muted. I don't tend to look at the chat during the meeting. I get a copy of it after the meeting, but I do see a headline. Is there a reason the chat would be turned off? We turn it off during the business session.
Can I just check? Can folks hear me? I've had real transportation problems. Great. Okay. So I'm on my
I can
phone.
hear you
Sorry.
very well.
Molly.
And is there anyone else that needs to be elevated? I'm just looking through the list of attendees.
Is there anyone else from Westhab or is just?
I just saw Valerie and Jim. Jim, are you Coughlin or Coughlin?
Coughlin.
Coughlin. Okay, see there, I got it wrong.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know how Jorge Fernandez.
George Fernandez.
George Fernandez. Okay, so let's elevate him. And he is also an attendee, so we'll elevate him, and then I'll ask you later to introduce everyone to us. And who is Cindy Teta?
Cindy Tita
Tita. Okay, she also
is a program administrator, as
Great.
well as George Fernandez.
Okay, good. So we'll elevate Cindy Tita. Bob, I guess that when you leave, you can make me and Adam co-hosts because Adam.
Well, Adam's already a co-host, but I'll make you the
Oh,
host.
there you go. All right. So, And we don't know how to turn off the chat, but perhaps someone will figure that out. And we're going to start very soon. We're just, it's 5:34. We're just getting our act together.
Okay.
I suppose we can also elevate, should we also elevate people who are from Community Board 2?
I just.
I can do that. I'll do Donna Raftery. I see
And-
Donna Raftery. I see Frederica Siegel.
And Carter could probably answer the question about the chat. He's
Carter on?
he's on.
Oh, hey,
Oh,
Carter.
Yeah,
do you know
so
how
for
to-
the chat, go to the participants
Yeah,
and then at the, let's see, maybe they moved it. I can't see it because I'm a co-host. I'm not a co-host, but
Yeah.
at the bottom, if you should have some options that used to be there.
yeah, I only see lower.
Or
all.
if you,
There's three
there's a
dots
little
there.
up arrow next to the chat. Yeah, it's either the 3 dots or maybe the up arrow, the small up arrow next to the chat.
Let's see. Okay, the 3 dots, save the chat, attendees can chat
With
Right.
no one.
with no one. Okay, fine. I'll do that later. Thank you for helping me with that. And let's just see who else is on from CB2.
Ryder Kessler.
Go ahead, Ryder.
I'm already here.
Oh, he's already
I'm
here.
sorry, I'm on the wrong, sorry about that.
Um,
No, Susanna, one more thing. I forgot to turn on the subscript. So if you could go into live transcript at the bottom and just turn this subscript on if anybody wants to read the.
okay, I don't, see live transcription, I'll hit enable. And I don't see something that says subscript. I just,
It's,
Subtitles are now showing up.
oh, do we need those? I don't really want those.
well,
I'm
people,
gonna hide the subtitles. That's too confusing to me. We just want to make sure that the live transcription is happening, but we don't need to see it because that will drive me insane.
Each person can put it on their own computer. You don't have to
Right.
see it, which is nice for people who need it.
Good, great. Yeah, I've never had to see it before. I don't see anyone else from CB2, but if we do, you'll let us know. Adam will monitor the chat more than I'll be able to. And there we go. Okay, so it is now 5:36. And we will start the meeting. Welcome everybody this is the April meeting of the Human Services Committee of Manhattan Community Board 2. We have one agenda topic tonight. We are going to hear from Westhab, which is a not-for-profit social service organization based in Westchester. And they are working on plans to develop a homeless shelter at 349 Canal Street. We're going to start with introductions. We'll start with the committee, and then we'll move on to introduce our panelists, and then I'll tell you what the run of show is going to be, and then we'll get going. So first of all, I'm Susanna Aaron. I'm the chair of this committee. Adam,
Adam Zeldin, I'm the vice chair.
Rachel,
Hi, Rachel Yarmolinsky. I'm the public member of this committee.
Keen,
Keen Berger, proud member of this committee.
I like the annotation. Ryder Kessler,
Also proud member of this committee and CB2.
John Paul.
Verna, tolerating member of this.
Will,
Will Benish, committee member.
Wayne,
Hi, Wayne Quadler, committee member.
and those are the members of our committee. There are also a number of people from CB2, the full board here. I'll just name those. Michael Levine is here, and I see Janine Kiley, who is our chair. I see Coral Dawson and Anthony Wong, Carter Booth, and Donna Raftery, and Frederica Siegel. Thank you guys all for being here. Let's begin with introductions of people from the Department for Social Services, which oversees the Department of Homeless Services. Ilani, why don't you start with introducing yourself by name and title, and then introduce all the members of your team.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Leilani Irvin, I'm the Manhattan Borough Director for the Department of Social Services. I'm joined with our provider Westhab and our esteemed senior leadership from the Department of Social Services. I'll turn it over to my senior leadership to introduce themselves, starting with First Deputy Commissioner Molly Park. Molly Park.
Hi, I'm Molly Park. I'm the First Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Homeless Services. I apologize in advance. I've had extremely challenging transportation today, so I am in transit. I will keep myself on mute as much as I can.
Well, you're looking good anyway.
Thank you.
Anybody else from DSS?
Yep. Cindy, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Cindy T.
We lost your audio, Cindy.
We lost you.
Oh, your audio is bad.
Cindy Tita is the Assistant Commissioner for Adult Services.
Okay.
Commissioner for Single Adult Shelter Operations with the Department.
Try again. Try one more time, Cindy.
Also, so my apologies to everyone.
We can hear you now.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Tita. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Single.
All right.
She's the Assistant Commissioner of Single Adult.
Which I Westhab. I apologize that I'm not on video because I'm in transit.
Right.
She's our Assistant Commissioner.
Is that okay?
She's the Assistant Commissioner of Single Adults.
And George also?
I think Yvonne.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Her name is Leila. Yeah, we have to rename you, Yvonne.
Can you hear me, Leilani?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you just introduce yourself to us?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yvonne Ballard. I'm an Associate Commissioner with DHS Adult Shelter Operations.
Great. And if you're able to rename yourself, that would be great. I mean, I can do it, but I don't know. I think it only does it for me. And I don't actually know the spelling of your name. So I'll ask you to do it. I think there's one more person from DSS. Is that right, Leilani?
Yes. We also are joined with the Program Administrator, George Fernandez.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm George Fernandez. I'm the Program Administrator under Cindy Tita and Yvonne Ballard in Single Adult Shelter Operations. And Westhab is one of the providers on the right purview. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now let's just go to Westhab. We'll start with Jim Coughlin.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Jim Coughlin. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Westhab.
And will you introduce the members of your toss to the members of your team?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Valerie C. Smith. I'm the Vice President for NYC Shelter Programs.
Great. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of the run of show for tonight. And thanks everybody for making this earlier time. A lot of very busy schedule on CB2. There's a meeting about cannabis among several community boards tonight, and that starts at 6:30. So we're trying to squeeze both things in at the same time. The run of show, we're first going to hear about Westhab, and then I can turn it over to Molly going forward. Okay, we're going to hear from Westhab, we last met with Westhab in May of 2021. Before that, we met with them in March of 2021. When I get a breather, I'm going to put in the chat links to the 2 reports that came out of our meetings with them. Those are all to be found, both to be found on the CB2 website. So if you're anxious to get to them before I'm able to put them in the chat, you can go to the CB2 website, look under committees, look under committee materials, and you will find those, but I will make this easier for you. Then we're going to take questions and comments. We're going to start with members of our committee, and then we'll broaden out to members of Community Board 2 who are kind enough to participate tonight. And then we'll go to the members of the public. I see right now 64 attendees who are attendees of tonight's meeting. And then after a public session, our committee is going to enter into business session, and just some guidelines about that. Everyone is welcome to listen in on the business session, but the conversation itself will only be among members of this committee. It's important, other members of CB2 are welcome to listen in, but we're not going to take comment. It's important for our committee to have this opportunity for us to work together as a small group. So we're very happy to have you join. And I will also turn off the chat function once we begin our business session. We just found it to be too distracting, and we don't want, and we just want to be able to focus on the conversation. So let us start. I'm going to toss it to Jim and ask you guys to give us an update of where we stand with all this. And while I do that, I'm going to find these other documents to share with you.
Sure. Thanks, Susanna. And again, thank you for having us tonight. We look forward to answering your questions. I'm sure there are a lot of them, and we look forward to working with you over the coming months and years. I'm sure we'll have a lot more of these meetings, and I'm sure we'll be in person at some point so we can actually meet each other in person, which would be great. So just to give a quick update on where things stand. So as all of you know, we have been working on a shelter with DHS now for about a little over a year, 14 months maybe, at 349 Canal. This is a 200-bed single men's shelter. The update, a couple updates. I think I mentioned this to you in the last meeting, but I will just confirm this. There were a lot of questions last time regarding the entrance to the facility. So we were able to confirm, and I'll confirm it again tonight, that the entrance to the facility will not be on Canal Street, it'll be on Worcester.
Wait. I'm sorry, it's not going to be on Canal Street, it's going to be on Worcester?
Did I say that wrong? No, that's.
Yeah, it should be the other way around. I thought we wanted the other way around.
Is it, just clarify it for us.
No, I'm sorry. I thought that it was, the original entrance was, and Leilani, jump in here if I'm saying this wrong. I thought the original entrance was Canal and we were moving it to Worcester.
That is correct. When I gave the formal notification, the entrance was Canal Street and the ask was for it to be moved to.
I'm sorry, but actually, this is just a point of information. We can hash this out later. It was the other way around. The address that was first presented to us was, it's a T-shaped building with a facade on Canal Street and a facade on Worcester Street, and there was a keen interest in having the entrance be on Canal Street. And actually in our May meeting, when you guys came back, you confirmed for us at that time that it was going to be on Canal Street. So if that has changed, we just need to know that.
That's fine. We will confirm that, but if it was Worcester originally moving to Canal, and that's what we confirmed, that's what will happen.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if I'm confusing people there, but we'll confirm that right after the meeting.
Yeah, I think we can talk more about that because when the formal notification was 10 Canal Street, was Canal Street.
Yeah,
not
I'm sorry to I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but actually for the people who live in the neighborhood, that distinction was very important. Worcester Street is a very quiet street with very limited commercial activity on it. Canal Street is a large two-way thoroughfare with a lot of business activity on it and a lot of commercial real estate. So that is a much more desirable entrance.
Understood.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
In reference to the site as well, I spoke with the developer late last week. There has been no work that's been done to the actual building. He's still going through the permit process, the landmark process, as well as environmental reviews that he has to go through. So there's been nothing done to the actual building itself. If everything if everything started to move quickly, he's said he's about 18 to 24 months out. If everything happened the way that he would expect it to happen. So I'm just giving you a time frame of 18 to 24 months. That may slip a little bit, but I'll continue to update community board as I get more information on that.
So just another question. When we met with you last year, that was the same time frame. It was 18 to 24 months a year ago. So can you let us know a little bit about what has changed?
What's changed is the process. The landmark process has taken a lot longer than what he expected.
I see.
Yeah, it's a very lengthy, detail-oriented process. He didn't expect it to take this long.
Okay, so it's all been pushed back.
Correct.
Let's start with questions from members of our committee. Let's see how we're going to do. Raise your hands. John Paul, you want to start?
Hi, thank you. And thank you for being here. I guess I'm just trying to better understand the facilities and the benefits that they're ultimately promised to be. I guess my concern is, and maybe this has come up with the recent Chinatown one, that there's different ways to get to solving this shared problem. And I'm just trying to find out why we're, and I guess this developer is insisting on going through with one of the ways that maybe has a tremendous amount of pushback. So can you just help me understand that why this, of all the different ways that we can help this population, is better in this model, setting aside the location, which I'm sure a lot of the participants would want to speak to.
So I'm sorry, just to clarify, John, you're asking why this is this is designed for those of you who may not have followed earlier conversations about this. This is planned to be a congregate shelter of small 8 to 12 people per room for 200 single adult men who would be placed here after undergoing the intake process of the New York City Department of Social Services. So John, your question is about the decision to have that program here, a congregate shelter here.
Yes, I guess I'm pushing back on congregate shelters generally, and maybe I want you to kind of defend that or help educate me on why that's a viable model and good model, and help understand why that's model, which you've now defended, is actually preferable to any of the other offerings. Like, why wouldn't we do smaller 10-person facilities at a greater number of places so there's not a concentration of some of the less desirable consequences of having populations congregating?
So this is Molly Park. Let me jump in and start the conversation. Just to describe sort of the two primary types of shelter options, maybe three that have been in the news lately. The bulk of DHS shelters for single adults are congregate sites, as we have, as we're talking about for this particular project. Every congregate site, including this one, has extensive services on site, 24/7 security. But then we have sites that are designed for people experiencing street homelessness, which is known as safe havens, and then a similar but slightly less service-rich model known as stabilization beds. They also have services on site, also have 24/7 security. There are a few differences between the shelter model and the street safe haven and stabilization model. Really, I think the key difference is shelters have curfew, and the safe havens and stabilization beds do not have a curfew. Shelters, you get logged out. A client can potentially lose his or her bed after 24 hours of being absent from the shelter. In a safe haven, it's 72 hours. And for shelters, clients access that by going through the formal DHS intake process. For the street beds, for the safe havens and stabilization beds, they're referred through intake. Otherwise, I think it's, those are really key structural differences. Otherwise, I would say that the sites operate on a continuum. Every site is offering services. Every site has the same security. The services may differ a little bit depending on what population that we're serving, but really our goal is to meet clients where they are at and to try and provide a good environment for clients as they come in. There are people for whom the more flexibility with the safe haven, as I say, no curfew, things like that is really important. There are other people who really benefit from the structure. So we need a variety of services within our system. To your question about something like a 10-bed facility, we really don't have anything like that in the DHS portfolio, just because in order to be able to operate and to have the critical mass of staff that we need, right? You want to have a caseworker, you want to have a housing specialist, you want to have medical personnel, you want all of those different specialties. You can't effectively do that in a site that has 10 beds. So I hope that gives a little bit of an overview of the different models that we have in our system.
I also, just to jump in, just from having read reports from, Coalition for the Homeless and stuff like that, can you maybe address sort of the citywide issue? I mean, my understanding, with 50,000 people registered every year in the assess's system, there's a question of economies of scale, right? I mean, we would all love to have single bedrooms, but is that feasible for citywide as a policy?
I certainly don't think it's it's not feasible operationally. It's very challenging. I also think it's less than ideal. There are people for whom a single room is absolutely the right option. We work very closely with people to assess medical needs. Somebody who has a chronic health condition, transgender individuals with particular privacy needs. Again, I'm really sorry about the noise. I will be inside very shortly. Are eligible for a single room. But for other people, the isolation, particularly for people, with a variety of complicated histories, can be less than ideal. So again, having a variety of different spaces we can meet people depending on whatever their particular needs are is something that is really beneficial to us, and we think to our clients.
And just following up on my previous question, I think Susanna's question was actually great. What is, you have several facilities, right? And say you're Manhattan, what is the vacancy rate, or what capacity are we at? Are they running at 99.9% or something else? And if so, what is that?
We are not at 99.9%, which is, thank goodness, because if we do that, we basically cannot operate the system. We are legally mandated to provide shelter to anybody who needs it. And we want the system to have at least a 5% vacancy rate. We need that 5% vacancy rate so that, because we have to operate for the peak and not for the average, right?
So do they run at 95?
It varies. Demand comes up and down. It's first of the month will be a little bit lower because people are getting, might be getting benefit checks, things like that. Towards the end of the month tends to go up. Around holidays, people might go home to the family, so it varies. But we tend to be, in the mid 90s.
Oh, so it is mid 90s.
In that, again, there's quite a bit of variation.
Right. And I understand the peaks and troughs of the year, but I'm just trying to figure out the necessity of a 200-person shelter and whether this is maybe just expansion without necessity.
It is something that we need, in addition to the fact that we have to do this planning and that we have to be able to serve anybody who needs it. The city has made a very public commitment to getting out of commercial hotels. We have, there was a period of time where we did not have sufficient shelter. And so, sorry, I walked up the stairs, I'm breathing a little heavy. So we didn't have enough shelter. We are using commercial hotels as shelter. It is less than ideal for clients because there is generally not sufficient recreation and social service space, and it is very expensive for the city. So we have made a public commitment to get out of those, and so we are replacing that capacity.
Okay, it sounds like there's logs to log in and log out, and I know they have curfews, so I'm sure you guys are well regulated. Is there a way to provide to us kind of like I guess over the arc of the year, the vacancy rates of the different shelters that you guys have?
I don't know that we can do it on a shelter by shelter basis, but let me talk to my colleagues and we can figure out what we can get to you. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me also ask, before we go on to Keen, let me also ask, we see the Coalition for the Homeless is the court-appointed monitor of the system. And they put out a report every year. The recent report that I looked at described vacancy rate of 1.5% versus versus a target of 3%. Is that a fair number? Is that based on an average, or do you think that we should just sort of disregard that in considering vacancy?
I'm not exactly sure where they got their data. It may be, certainly it originated with us. How exactly they manipulated it, I would need to dig into that and look. Right now in our families with children system, we are running a lower vacancy rate than we are in our single adults. But I've been at DHS 2.5 years, and that has flipped at various points in time. We've been very close to 100% occupancy on the single adults and better on the families with children. So, it does change. Also depends on whether or not you're counting. We have separate facilities, as I talked about, for those experiencing street homelessness. They aren't part of our official census, but that's certainly something that the coalition looks at. So they may have included those as well.
Thanks. Shall we move on to Keen? Keen, you're muted.
You talked about the differences having to do with congregate and the other kinds, safe haven being curfews and stuff, but isn't the big difference that privacy? I mean, it seems what we've been hearing is that what people really want is single rooms or double rooms, and this is dorm structures. Isn't that a major issue, or am I wrong on that?
So the safe havens are on, there's variation in the safe havens. So
what about, isn't it true? Is it not true, or maybe it is not true, that people prefer more privacy if they're homeless? Isn't that?
I think, certainly many people, yes, would prefer more privacy. I think there are real differences of opinion about the extent to which, having sometimes medically frail people with other kinds of special needs, whether or not it is a good idea to have everybody behind a closed door. I think there's differences of opinion. There are absolutely clients with real medical needs who need that privacy, and we will meet that need. But there's also instances where congregate settings are appropriate. The safe havens themselves can be anywhere from single rooms to dorms with multiple people in them. So, I think, and the same is true with shelters. The size of the dorms can vary. So I think it really is a continuum rather than a hard and fast difference between the two site models.
Thank you. Adam?
Thanks. I'm going to ask another question about the congregate nature of these. I'm sorry, I know everybody's very interested in this. I think we're all just reflecting on kind of what, we're trying to empathize with this experience that, our neighbors are going through. And I think everybody on this panel would want a door. And, when I've had conversations, small number of conversations, but I've had conversations, I've heard, primary research that people want doors. Do you guys have survey data, of people who have stayed at shelters? Do you have survey data about, what type of option they'd prefer? And then B, just in my ignorance, are there studies that are, sort of the North Star for these decisions that you guys are making? I've heard opinion, but are these opinions, derived from studies? I'm imagining they are. I expect that you're going to say yes, of course. That, there are better outcomes in this type of congregate setting than there are in settings where people do not have a congregate facility. Those are my two questions. You have survey data, and then do you also have survey data around preferences, and do you also have outcomes data that drives the decisions around what these sites look like?
I don't have survey data. I talk a lot, and our
team talks a lot, and I think maybe Westhab can chime in, but talk a lot to the providers who operate a variety of different sites, and think that there is some value add to having a variety of different of dormitory types. I think fully acknowledge that probably most of the individuals experiencing homelessness would prefer a smaller setting. I think there's operational challenges with putting certain vulnerable people in a smaller setting. We did do it. We moved a lot of people into hotel rooms during the peak of the pandemic. We moved close to 10,000 people in 8 weeks. It was a really phenomenal effort on behalf of the single adult team. But as we went through that process, we were working with the providers who said, in some case, we left some shelters as less dense than they were, but not moving everybody into single and double rooms, because there were concerns about sort of other adverse impacts of having sometimes socially isolated and otherwise vulnerable people behind closed doors. But I really get my expertise from talking to the providers, from talking to the people who are on the ground every day. So I don't know whether Jim and Valerie, you want to chime in to talk a little bit, because I know you operate shelters with both types of models.
The only thing that I would add to that, thank you so much, is number one, would love to see just data that outlines the outcomes from the low density and high density options, just to see what actually happens to folks who've had this experience. And the only other thing that I'd say, and I know we're so lucky to have, so many good providers. We've got, we're thrilled to have them come to this forum and have conversations with them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the providers have an incentive to increase density because it lowers their operating costs. And we just have to keep that in mind when we consider information that comes, from that source.
Before I turn things over to the Westhab team, let me just clarify that everything that the providers do is on a reimbursement basis. So we approve their budget based on a particular density, and then they have to submit invoices that show the costs, and the city covers that cost through the contract. So there actually is really no incentive for because the cost allocation is essentially the same.
Well, it's part of the competitive process, right? If they said, we're going to open, we're going to rent out one of these glass towers, it's going to be $50,000 a month per resident, you would say no. So that is their incentive, right? They're trying to keep costs down, to remain competitive, to get RFPs approved, to open a shelter, and then they can reimburse.
Certainly yes, providers are competing for RFPs, but I think also DHS and our multiple oversight agencies, because it's not just DHS, right? Everything goes through OMB, everything goes through the controller, right? Through the Mayor's Office of Contracts, right? We are fairly sophisticated, reviewers, where we can say, and we actually have a standardized budget model where we can say, this is what it costs to run a 50-unit shelter. We don't really have very many 50-unit shelters, but this is what it costs to run a 100-bed shelter. This is what it costs to run a 200-bed shelter. There are ratios, many of which are actually regulatory coming from the state, right? Where we say, you're required to have one caseworker for every 25 people, right? Those things are standard. Where the variation comes from is on the real estate cost. Primary source of variation is on the real estate costs, and there we're looking at market comps for the local neighborhood.
I think that one of the things that these questions are trying to get at is the congregate model, from us outside seems less than ideal. We've heard stories about, for example, when the mayor recently swept up a bunch of homeless encampments, that of 269 people who were kicked out of subways or whatever encampments they were in, only 5 agreed to go to congregate shelter. So I think what we're trying to get at is just how much of the need for a congregate shelter is based on, outcomes, and how much of it is just economic reality. I mean, I think we can appreciate the fact that the city's got 50,000 people it has to house, and it has to do it by law. not everyone is going to get a $2,000, the equivalent of a $50,000 apartment, as Adam would say. So we're just trying to, maybe you can help us understand that distinction between clinical need and just economic realities.
Valerie, can you talk a little bit about our experience with the both sites, congregate setting and shared rooms or single rooms?
Sure. So we do have a mixture of sites that we operate. And so we, as a provider, once we are getting clients assigned to us, we need to look at where they are mental wise, if they present with mental health issues. And so those are the folks that we would want to put in a larger dorm, because we need to make sure that they're safe, and the more people around them, we're able to monitor them along with our security team. If we have a site where the individuals are employed and are pretty stable, the only issue that they present with is they're homeless because they were burnt out, they got evicted, whatever it is. And so those folks are a little bit more stable, and those are the folks that oftentimes end up in a single or a double room. I have found over the years that someone that is presenting with a lot of medical and or mental health issues do much better in a setting where there are more people that they could lean on when the staff is not readily available, because we have to do rounds of the entire facility.
It's interesting, it's kind of a paradox, because what we have been reading in the news is that people who have chosen to sleep on the street rather than go into, to take advantage of their legal right to shelter, are staying on the street because they find the congregate shelters to be scary places that are not welcoming to them at all. So we're just trying to get a grip on that. What we're hearing from you guys is that the congregate shelters can be clinically beneficial, more, better than single rooms. But we're just trying to get a grasp on that, because it conflicts with what we've been reading.
Right. So if I can chime in on that, I think there's the vast majority of single adults experiencing homelessness in New York City are in shelter, right? There are at any given night about 17,000 single adults in the shelter system, and numbers vary, and of course counts aren't entirely precise, but in the neighborhood of about 3,000 people who are experiencing street and subway homelessness, right? So the majority of people who have found themselves in this moment of crisis are opting for the shelter system. There are certainly many stereotypes about the shelter system. I think some of them have to do with the way the system might have looked a while ago. The DHS has done a lot of investment in the system to build up emphasis on services. We have cleared out 94% of the building violations in the DHS system. That's not single adult specifically, that's system wide. We have actually shrunk our footprint by about 45% over the last 5-6 years by closing capacity that we found to be substandard, and instead investing in a smaller number but of higher quality sites, right? So there's been a lot of work done over the last 5 years to decade to really improve the shelter system. But I think, it takes even longer to change people's perceptions of what the system might be like. The other thing, and I think I will go back to some of the conversation that I was having earlier about rules, right? The shelter system is a fairly regimented space, right? That is true because it's subject to fairly extensive regulation by the state, because we are working hard to make safe spaces that are safe and controllable, and that are where people can stabilize. But there are rules, right? And so for people who are experiencing street homelessness, I don't want to stereotype people, but many of whom have a history of behavioral health issues, many of whom have a history of substance use issues, many of whom have a criminal justice history. That particular experience of something that feels institutional, because although we are very much a social service agency and invest very heavily in the social services, we are creating a system, these are there are rules, right? And so that is sometimes a place that people distrust, and it needs a lot of engagement to get people in. The safe havens and stabilizations also still have rules, right? They are still subject to DHS policy, but they are a little bit more flexible, and that's, I think, why they have sometimes been more appropriate for people who are coming directly from the street. I do want to be clear, in the case of this Canal Street project that we are talking about, this is not a safe haven, not a stabilization bed. So clients will come to this site after going through the DHS assessment process. So they will come in through intake. They will then spend on average 3 weeks at a DHS assessment site where they're going through, excuse me, a medical history, a employment history, and really sort of working with the staff to understand what kind of placement would be better for them. So, so this is an option that we think works for some people. It does not work for all people. I am not going to pretend that operational realities don't also play into this. This is a site that we can operate. DHS is responsible. We are legally and morally responsible for operating a system that is the size of many cities in the United States, right? And we do have to make sure that operations work.
I just want to add to, and Valerie, jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but the outcomes that we've seen over the years in our congregate facilities versus our facilities where we have 2 to a room are pretty similar. The outcomes of moves to permanent housing, the outcomes of individuals getting employment, are pretty similar. As is, we have, if we have incidents in a facility, in a congregate facility, we have similar incidents in facilities that aren't congregate. So I just want to make that point. They are similar in terms of those 2 issues.
Thank you. I saw that Will Benish had his hand up. Oh, there Will, do you want to go? You had your hand up and then you left, and then now you're back. So let's. Go?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Susanna. Again, thanks to Westhab and DHS for joining our meeting. We do appreciate it. Jim, I think you mentioned something about an environmental study that was being done. And that was one reason why it's going to take 18 to 24 months to open. Does that include a possible remediation, environmental remediation, given the fact that this is opening in an old garage? And are we aware of any other shelters that have opened in a parking garage before? And do we know of any of the environmental impact of that? And then the second thing I would add is, do you know if that study is going to include, say, a ventilation study and a risk of, infectious disease spread within the facility?
In terms of your first question, we won't know until the study's done. If there's remediation that needs to happen at the site, they're in the process of going through that. So if something does happen to come up that needs to be, a remediation needs to be done, then yes, that would happen. In terms of the clean air, I know since COVID, we have certain restrictions that have been put on sites from the state and from the city that we have to, certain criteria around clean air and ventilation. In terms of the study, I'm not sure. I will check with the developer to see if that's part of the environmental that they're doing, but I know that we have requirements that we need to do from the state and the city and need to implement.
And do we know if are there any other, is there any precedent for a shelter being opened in a former parking garage, or is this the first one?
I know of at least one other, and I'm, sorry, I can't speak to every single site in our portfolio, but I do know of others. Yeah.
Okay. And do you know, was there remediation that had to be done on that or no?
I don't know off the top of my head. Leilani, you might. I'm thinking of Audubon, but if not, we can get back to you.
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
Thanks. Wayne?
Sure. Hi. So you had, let me just get, if I'm getting this right, you had said the safe haven beds are better for folks who are street homeless and need fewer rules. So what kind of homeless folks are better in a congregate shelter? I guess, is it folks who just need more structure?
Yeah, so the intake process for the 2 different kinds of sites, the majority of people
men experiencing homelessness will come in through 30th Street. They go through intake there, go to the assessment site where they're there for a few weeks, work with the DHS or provider. Some of them, the assessment sites are directly operated, some of them are providers, to go through, an evaluation of medical needs, employment, start to develop a rehousing plan, but really sort of figure out what the best program shelter model is there. And then they are connected from assessment to a program shelter like the one that we're planning for Canal Street. With people experiencing street homelessness, their contact is usually starts with an outreach worker. We have, between city employees and contracted, we have more than 600 outreach workers who are out 24/7, working with individuals experiencing street homelessness. In many cases, it takes, dozens or more points of contact before somebody is ready to come inside. But when that individual raises their hand and says, yes, I'm ready to come inside, the placement might be to a stabilization bed or a safe haven, or it might actually be to shelter. These are, I keep using the word continuum. I'm maybe overusing it, but it actually really is true that there is a broad spectrum of services that we offer. And, it's people move back and forth between different parts of the system and have different needs. But for everybody, the goal is permanent housing, and there are staff, whether it's at a safe haven or a stabilization bed or a shelter, who's working with the client on permanent housing.
And how does somebody get to 30th Street? I mean, how does that referral, is that from like hospital referrals or?
Unfortunately, occasionally, sometimes the hospitals will discharge to 30th Street. I mean, that is there is one intake center for each of our shelter populations, two for single women, and those are addresses, unlike the rest of our shelter addresses, but those are addresses that we advertise widely. So families, the intake centers in the Bronx, single men, it's 30th Street. For women, single women, because of the prevalence of domestic violence, we actually have two, one in the Bronx and one in Brooklyn, so that people can go to the borough for which they feel most comfortable. And adult families, which are families without a child under the age of 18, that's also at 30th Street. So those are, that's information that we make very widely available. Community groups know where intake happens. Certainly the outreach teams know, and if somebody is choosing to go to intake, that's never discouraged. We're always happy to work with people at intake. Hospitals do sometimes discharge directly to intake, although that's something we discourage. We try and work very hard to make sure that with hospital, to make sure that there is a plan for somebody with who's coming direct from the hospital, because they generally have higher medical needs.
And 30th Street, they could just walk in, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's just
24/7.
Rachel?
I had one question and one comment. I just want to say how difficult it is to provide a service that everyone wishes we didn't have to provide. In other words, we don't want more shelters. We don't want homeless people. We want people to have housing. And our society seems to be failing miserably at providing actual housing for people and jobs. And also, a lot of this problem part of it certainly started when we emptied all of our big mental health hospitals onto the street without providing, which we were supposed to do, local homes. So there's just lots of problems here. You are working in one area where, as I say, we wish we didn't have to have we wish we didn't have to provide homeless services because there shouldn't be homeless people. My interest is, in the long run, is to start building more housing and stop building more shelters. And I don't know how to make that happen in a government. Obviously it's not your job to do that, but it would be something I'd like to see the city work at. My question for the specific shelter is, how long do people typically stay in the shelter? Do they end up back on the street or back somewhere else? How many people get into housing, which I would assume is the goal of getting people out of shelter into housing?
So let me start, and then I can turn it over to Westhab to talk about their specific record and their other sites. But I couldn't agree with you more that housing is the end goal. I actually do see it as part of my job. I came from the affordable housing space, and it's something that I believe really, really deeply in. In New York City, there are more than 500,000 households making less than $30,000 a year and paying more than 50% of their income in rent. So as long as we have, and that's, that is the narrowest version, right? If you make $35,000 a year, you're not in that number that I just cited, right? So as long as we have that degree of housing instability, I think it is incredibly important that we have a high quality shelter system that can, meet people where they are, help stabilize and help people get back on their feet. But affordable housing should always be the goal. And we're actively collaborating with our housing agency partners to think about ways that we can expand the pool of resources for DHS clients and for people who are at risk of becoming DHS clients. In general, when people are placed into subsidized housing, so that means either with a general non-capital A affordable housing, but with a subsidy, city runs a massive city funded subsidy program, or into affordable housing that was actually financed as affordable housing. The success rates are very, very high. For single adults, I think the return rate within 2 years is it's certainly well under 10%. So we have a great track record there. That's system wide. I'm going to pass the ball to Westhab for them to talk about their experience.
And wait, before you do, I just want to jump in. I just want to thank DSS and Molly. You're getting grilled. It's very useful for us. It really is. But we do recognize that we're grateful for your ability to teach us about all of this and to take our sometimes tough questions.
You're very generous. I'm very happy to be here.
Westhab.
So the average length of stay in shelter runs anywhere between 9 to 12 months. And the goal of anyone that we service in any of our facilities is to move them to permanent housing. And so the time varies because it depends on where the individuals are when they come to us. And so there are times when they come to us and they're unemployed. So or they are suffering with either physical or mental issues. And so we got to address those issues before we could begin to place them into housing. And so my team and I, we're working to figure out what are those instances and what are those impediments that have landed them in homelessness. And so we address those. And then we have a housing component where everyone that is in our facility are linked to a housing specialist. And so that person's primary role is to move them into permanent housing. And so like Molly mentioned, there is a plethora of housing vouchers that we get our clients approved for. And then we begin to look for housing along with the individual to move them out of shelter. One of the things that we are concerned about as an agency is not to just place them in an apartment and they're still having all of these issues that first landed them in shelter. And so we are working with them to link them to services in the community to fill those deficits. And so we have a social worker that would work with them to get them linked to mental health services, to primary care doctors. We have our employment team that is those that have come to us with jobs, we're looking to upgrade their jobs. Those that don't have jobs, we're working to get them linked with jobs. And so we are conscious that in order for someone to be successful, once we place them, they need to be able to take care of themselves. And if they can't, they need to know where to go for the additional help. And so that is one of the things that I think have made our sites quite successful. Over the last year during the pandemic, we moved 210 individuals into permanent housing. And in looking at the reports that we get from Department of Homeless Services, I would say about 2% have returned to shelter, have returned back to shelter. And so I think that is a pretty good percentage thus far.
Can you just give us a sense of scale, 200 people out of a population of your clients?
So the 210 is in our single portfolio. And so we, at the time, had about 800 individuals that we're working with.
So 25% roughly were moved into housing. What happens to those that don't move into the housing? Do they just stay at the shelter longer?
They're still in our shelter. And so we, remember, this is a continual process. And so, as we are moving folks out, we're getting new individuals. And so everyone is at a different stage of their process. And so we're constantly working with them to move them along the continuum of care.
And are there people who are sort of very difficult to house, who stay in shelter for years on end? I mean, I'm just asking about, sort of parameters.
Yeah. We have individuals who are severely mentally ill. And so those folks will tend to stay a bit longer because we need to make sure that they're linked with the appropriate services. And so we find that if they're with us longer, we're able to get them that much more stable. There are instances where we could move them out, but then I think that we're doing them a disservice if we know that this person cannot function by him or herself. And so, the social worker, we have a licensed clinical social worker along with licensed social workers who are working with them to get them linked, not to service, but also to get them into supportive housing so that that service and that support continues once we place them.
I'd just say, I think the population that is the hardest to house system-wide is individuals who are undocumented because they're generally ineligible for most of the housing subsidies.
Wow. Ryder?
Thanks. So first, I just want to say, thank you all for being here. And I want to agree with the idea that more housing is probably the underlying need, first of all, to reduce rent prices, because, we know that it's folks not being able to afford stable long-term housing that drives them into the shelter system and then exacerbates mental health and addiction issues, and not the other way around. And I think I also just want to acknowledge, it's very hard for people to get into permanent housing from the shelter system. And it's also because we make it hard. We make it very hard to get vouchers and to get approval for long-term permanent housing. And there's good reporting just today I can drop in the chat about, all the very loophole kind of pitfalls that folks can get pitched on before getting access to vouchers and permanent housing. So we need to do more at both sides of the pipeline, but that is not what my question is about. My question is circling back to privacy, and specifically to Adam's question earlier about survey data and perspectives of folks who are in the shelter system about preferences for various types of shelter housing. And because my understanding, I've been looking at this while we've been talking, that there was a survey of single adults in congregate shelters who were moved to private hotel rooms during COVID about that experience and the impact of having privacy out of the shelter, of congregate shelter settings. And the data I was just looking at said, there was a 78% improvement in mental health amongst folks who were surveyed, 77% improvement in physical health, and a 72% decline in use of alcohol and drugs. And to me, that survey data suggests a lot of power in privacy. And I just am curious about whether that sounds right, but also at this point in the planning of this facility, is there opportunity to move to a more private model? Is that conversation on the table? Thanks.
So let me start with the more global piece of it. Over the last couple of years, we have far and away the largest cause of death of individuals experiencing homelessness and individuals in the shelter system has not been COVID. It's been substance use and overdoses, right? I mean, orders of magnitude higher than COVID. And I say this not because everybody in the shelter system is a substance user, because I want to stigmatize our clients, but it is in fact, it's fact. All of our shelter staff system-wide are trained in naloxone use. We have, many clients are trained in naloxone use. We reverse hundreds of overdoses a year, but it remains an issue that we wrestle with, right? So I think, there are some advantages to having people in single rooms. There are also some real challenges. Suicide is another unfortunately common issue that we struggle with in the shelter system, right? Another reason why we do need to be careful about who is behind a closed door. So I think there is really no one size fits all option. I don't know if Westhab wants to talk a little bit about the specific plans for here.
Yes, so
Go
ahead, Jim.
No, I was going to say, just talk about the staffing and some of the services we're going to offer on site.
So with this site, we will have 10 case managers. So that means that each primary case manager will be carrying a case of 20. We will have a licensed clinical social worker. We will have a social worker. We will have someone who will be creating recreation activities for the men that are assigned to us. We will also have housing specialists, like I mentioned earlier, whose primary job would be to figure out what is the most viable voucher for the individuals to get so we can move them out of shelter. We will also have a psychiatrist on site and a couple of peer educators. And so along with obviously the management team. And so this entire team will be working with individuals to move them. And so the case manager is a person that is assigned to everyone that walks through our door. They will do a deeper dive than was done at the assessment center to figure out what the other issues are, and then figure out a plan in conjunction with the individual, because the person has to be an active participant in the plan to move them towards into permanent housing.
I want to say I offered into the chat toward the very top of our meeting links to two reports that CB2 has done already on this facility from our March 21 meeting and our May 21 meeting. So if you'd like more information, more detail that was provided to us, then you might find it there. John Paul, and then we'll go open it up to other members of CB2.
Thank you. I guess I appreciate you saying that a variety of types of facilities is ideal, because then you can really cover anyone with their particular needs. I guess when I was originally saying 10 to 1, I kind of just, 10-person shelter, I kind of just pulled that out. But you push back on that saying, well, we can't do that because just, economies of scale, we need, we can't fit that. But the facility you're saying that really is quite large still has 20 to 1 on social workers and 200 to 1 on psych. And a lot of those things I think could be overcome with technology. So I don't know why we're insistent on putting these populations together. And it also sounds kind of like better than these people who themselves are saying they want housing alone. And I understand that sometimes people maybe don't know exactly what's best for them. But in your, I think, goal, and maybe it's an admirable one at that, to chase the person who may off themselves in a private setting is coming at the expense of having a better facility for 99% of the other people that are there. I really can't get behind this, and I'm not hearing anything that's helping me to change my mind that this model is just not compatible with maybe what the things should be. And again, I'm not in this space, so I get that you guys work in this every day. But just help the uninitiated really understand why this model is better. Why are we telling people they shouldn't have their own housing that they're saying helps them? Why is it we saying that we have to help that 1% if it comes at the cost to the 99? Thank you.
So let me start by saying individual permanent housing is the goal for absolutely everybody. And we work really closely from day one to move people from shelter to permanent housing, right? And permanent housing is, there's a variety of things that permanent housing can look like. It can be a shared apartment. It can be supportive housing, which, as Valerie mentioned, and for those who aren't familiar with supportive housing, it's permanent housing. Individuals have a lease in their own apartment, but there are on-site social services. It can be, a rental voucher, and you're just renting, a plain vanilla apartment that any of us might rent. So there's a variety of different options, but helping, the goal for everybody is that permanent housing. And we place, again, this is a system-wide statistic, but about 200 households a week into subsidized housing, right? So that is something that we take really, really seriously. And I don't
don't want to discount that, that getting people into that independent living situation is the goal for absolutely everybody. You know, for the shelter system, we are balancing individual preferences, the safety concerns, and the need to meet people where they are, and the operational concerns of running a system that serves 45,000 people every day. So, you know, there are layers there. You know, we are looking at what the right balance is. We want to make sure that we do have the single rooms left or available for those who have the medical needs and the documented requirements to qualify for single rooms. So it's not, you know, this is something that we look at on a regular basis, and I wouldn't say that we are, you know, have found the magic number and that we are doing it, but we do need the diversity of options in the system. I don't know whether any of my colleagues or Westhab wants to chime in on that.
Okay, I think we're going to move now to broaden the questions. We'll invite anyone from CB2 to raise their hand. I see Donna Raftery has her hand up. Excuse me. And I don't know why you're an attendee and not a panelist, but and if anyone else from CB2 would like to speak, please raise your hand. As I said earlier, when we go into business session, we're no longer going to take comments from people outside the committee. So we'd love to hear from you now, and we are also grateful that you're here. So the only hand I see up now is, I saw Donna Raftery's hand. Let's see if she's still there. I don't see her anymore. Adam, do you see her? I see Coral Dawson. Coral, why don't you start?
Sure. I just wanted to, because sort of all the different meetings are kind of melding together and all the discussion topics kind of going back and forth. I'd like to ask, from when this was originally presented to this meeting tonight, what changes have been made to address any of the concerns that have been voiced in prior meetings by the community? And if you could just list those out, that would be very helpful, so we have a clear idea as to how you all have been able to incorporate any of the community feedback to date.
Are you talking about, Carl, just to clarify, you mean comments that came from last year, May of 2021?
At any point in time in any of our meetings. So since the beginning of when they came to actually engage the community to date, what changes have been made in the proposal that are addressing any of the concerns that have been voiced by the community since the initial meeting? I'd really appreciate knowing what those points are. Thank you.
Well, I'll just jump in with one of them that I'm familiar with, which is the entrance.
But it was clear that there's confusion on that, right?
No,
So
I was just about to say, I did go back and confirm, and that's my apologies on that. It is going on Canal. I missed.
Okay, great. So that would be a great start. Okay, something exactly like, so points like that. Thank you.
So just to jump in really quickly, because when we first notified to the community board, we gave a formal notification and a presentation about the site. This is an early notification. The site is not slated to open anytime soon. And so with that said, it was asked for us to come back to provide an update more so on the operations, on how this site will be operationalized. Now that we're a little further ahead and along in the process, Westhab can kind of give a little bit more of a spelled out, detailed update on what the site security would look like and what the operations at this location would look like, in which we heard them speak to at the top of today's call, as I understand it. And this is why we came back to provide that update. If there's anything specifically that the community board was expecting or anticipating Westhab to provide an update on, that type of guidance and clarity would be helpful. So that I think for Westhab, and Westhab, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was our expectation and understanding on coming back to provide an update on the site operations.
So in our reports last year, none of which is fresh in my mind, we did have a lot of rundowns in terms of what your staffing would be like, what your security detail would be like, and a lot of those kinds of things. It might be helpful to just tick off some of that again. It might be repetitive for those of us who remember it, and maybe helpful for those of us who don't. Is that a worthwhile thing, Jim and Valerie? that you
Sure.
guys could go through?
I mean,
And just before you go there, it's Coral again. So just so I'm clear though, there haven't been any changes made in the initial plan to the current plan versus, except for the entrance. I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting that.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think, and just to clarify, I think what Leilani was saying is that the first meetings we were here, things were so soft because it's so early that it's hard to talk about specific change.
Oh, except
Sorry.
for we did raise issues about the 10 security guards, whether or not people could be smoking, whether there was a recreational space, what the programming would be. There, I remember there being a whole lot of questions actually very specifically asked by the community board. And actually before you came back the second time. So those still have not been addressed in terms of any changes. And in terms of, is smoking going to be allowed? Is it going to be managed outside of the perimeter? Lighting, is it going to be provided around the area? There were a lot. So that's why I'm asking specifically, because, we sort of expected with the update to hear some sort of, some sort of feedback as to those community concerns.
The staffing pattern that we presented at the last meeting and what Valerie just went through, I'm not sure if she mentioned on the security side, I'll just quickly do that when I'm done, is the same staffing pattern today as it was when we presented over a year ago. In reference to the security, there'll be an on-site security manager, full-time at this facility, 6 supervisors also assigned to this facility, and then 40 staff that will be monitoring the facility, but also the general, we always do a 1 to 2 block radius at all of our facilities where the staff do community patrols, whether it be on foot or, by vehicle. And then we also respond to any community concerns, any community complaints in real time. There'll be a 24-hour number to this facility that anybody can call at any time and actually speak to somebody, a live person. If there's an issue within the community, we will immediately send staff out to address it, assess if it's a client of ours, and if it isn't, we will still address it. We take our good neighbor policy very seriously, and the staff at this facility will do the same.
So I thought you said 10 security people last time, because I remember the 10 to 200 being the ratio. And now you're saying 6, right?
I'm saying 6 supervisors and 40 staff in total, and then that's broken up per shift.
Right.
Okay. And
So-
10 on site at any given time? I'm just wondering, I had in my
Depends.
notes 10.
Yes.
Yeah, it depends on the shift, but yeah, it could be anywhere from 8 to 10 per shift.
Okay, and then,
a
and
morning
then
shift.
before you didn't mention the mental health counselor or the rec activity person or the housing expert. So those are not new, those were in the original plan?
I'm pretty sure we did, but the plan has not changed. It's the
Okay,
same staffing pattern.
Actually, I think Valerie, would you want to add to the discussion and also mention the roles that will be taking place by
Thank you.
Westhab security or staff, sorry.
Yeah, no, so those positions were always in the plan. So those were mentioned. I know that we did an extensive write-up and sent that to the community board. But Jim mentioned that we do a patrol. So that would be something that we would do as part of our general operating plan, is to go around the perimeter and make sure that our clients are not loitering in the community. And Jim already mentioned that we have the 24-hour call number. So we will respond when we are called.
I have a question that relates to this. What has been going on Westhab side in the last year since we met with you? Have you guys just been, this is on the back burner, not because you're waiting for the building to happen, so you haven't revisited any of the programming plans or any of the things you shared with us last year? Or have you been continuing to tweak all this and continue with programming design? Give us a sense of what's been going on over the last year for Westhab as far as this project is concerned.
I'm not sure I completely understand your question in terms of, the plan is the plan, the same plan that we presented a year ago in terms of, the staffing plan, the programs that will be offered on site, the housing opportunity programs, the employment programs,
right? Okay.
Counseling programs, et cetera. That's all the same. That has
Okay.
not changed.
Great.
In terms of, if you're going in terms of like direct contact and starting to foster relationships within the community, if that's where your question is going, no, we have not started that process yet.
And can you tell us when you will begin that process and what your plans are for that?
Soon, probably mid to late summer.
And we're working with Councilmember Marte's office, who's offered to be of some assistance and support with the connecting us with, individuals, stakeholders, Block associations and others and community. And they're going to help, broker and foster those relationships and link us so that we can engage the folks who need to be engaged in this area, who wish to engage with us.
I'm very encouraged to hear that, because I have to say, without having known that this project, the physical development was on hold, I've been very disappointed that we hadn't heard from you guys. So I'm very encouraged to hear that that's happening, and that the reason that hasn't happened yet is because the development itself has been tarrying. I wanted to pose another tricky question to you. Unfortunately, I have to burden you with this. There have been a couple of reports in the news that give us a little bit of pause. Your developer, Liberty One, there was a piece in the Times that said that I guess David Levitan, is that his name, has a number of contracts with the city to run homeless shelters, but that he has a very bad reputation as a notorious landlord of residential properties. Can you help give us some assurance about how we know that this is going to be well operated and that this building is going to be well maintained when your developer has a bad reputation?
Well, what I will say, I'm not going to speak, I can't speak directly for the developer other than our experience with him. We currently operate 6 facilities with this developer, and all 6 of them are, I would say, probably at the top of the list in terms of being well-maintained, clean facilities. This developer, and again, this is just our experience of working with them, are very responsive, are on top of any building needs that come up. It could be as simple as, making sure the floors are clean to replacing systems as they fail. In terms of assurances, Susanna, I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say it now. We are very open to having you come and visit, yourself and maybe 1 or 2 other community board members to come and actually see with your own eyes the facilities that we operate, and facilities that are, the landlord is Liberty One. We're throwing that invitation out to you, and we can set that up at some point, spring, summer. We actually look forward to that, to be honest. But again, I can only speak to our experience with Liberty One, and they've been very, very much easy to work with, on top of their buildings, and we're very proud to work with them.
Great, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Let me just chime in a little bit on what DHS does to make sure that all shelters are well run and operated. Yvonne and Cindy have staff who are out there on a very regular basis, right? So we have the program staff are there overseeing what is happening and looking at the building. We have DHS facility staff collaborating with HPD, Department of Buildings, and the fire department, who go out and inspect on a regular basis. The State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance inspects on a regular basis, and the Coalition for the Homeless inspects on a regular basis. So there's a lot of eyes on all of our DHS facilities, and to make sure that they are in fact well run and maintained. And that has not always been the case. And I mentioned we've done a lot of work to close facilities that don't meet our standards.
That's very encouraging. Another tough question. There have been some terrible stories in the news about shelter operators who were found to have been embezzling and taking, making money from providing security services and cleaning services. And what kind of assurances can we have? And I don't mean to incriminate you. I mean, it's just a question from a skeptic. What assurances can we have that this is an upright operation?
Other than me saying it will be an upright operation, and the fact that we get audited, consistently, we're being audited more and more. I mean, not just us, all providers. Especially since some of these things have come out in the media. And to speak frankly, it is, I'm sure for a community member who's reading these articles, who's not in this space, working in this space, it's appalling to read. And for Westhab to be a social service provider and have colleague vendors who are doing the things that you're reading, it is even more appalling. And it's infuriating, frankly. And, I've been at Westhab for 22 years. We take great pride in the work that we do. We welcome, eyes, we welcome audits. Other than the fact that, we've been in business for 40 years, we've never had any accusation, to what you're describing. All of our audits have always been, have gone very well. And, I'm proud of the programs that we operate. I don't know how else to answer that question.
No, it's fair. I mean, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I have to ask it. The other thing I'd like to ask of you is that, because you're a relatively new operator in New York City, and we're less familiar with you, we would love to be introduced to someone who has worked with you guys over many years. I'm sure that's probably in Westchester, not in New York City. But to have a clear understanding of what you guys are like as a partner from an impartial person who has partnered with you would be very helpful. I'm not asking for that name now, but I hope that in a follow-up conversation, we can have that. I've been looking for that for a long time. We have people, for project renewal and CUCS and Housing Works, they have long track records in the city, and lots of community boards that we know have worked with them, but we don't have the advantage of that experience with Westhab. So we would really like to be able to have that. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the community board, and then we'll go to the public. I see Michael Levine.
Yes, thank you. I would like to go back to the discussion of community outreach. In addition to meeting with the community board, which we appreciate, and your plans to reach out to stakeholders, I'm curious to know, after the facility opens, how do you plan to stay in contact with the local community? I'm particularly concerned about the residents immediately adjacent to the facility on both streets. Do you have plans to hold regular community meetings to maintain the kind of community outreach that you have shown at this point? Will that continue once the facility opens? And if so, how are you planning to conduct that?
The simple answer to that question is 100% yes. Valerie, you want to talk a little bit about our community advisory boards and how we go about doing that at our other sites?
So each of our sites, we have created a community advisory board, which consists of stakeholders, and this is a quarterly basis. However, we meet outside of those quarterly meetings, and so all of the managers in the site, we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we're able to respond to instances that may be impacting the community. And so once we begin to do the community outreach, my team and I will give out the business cards. And so you'll be able to reach us to address concerns that you may be having, or to tell us that you have an opportunity for someone in our site. And so that is how we have operated all of the sites that we have in our portfolio.
Yeah, and may I recommend that as soon as you open, that you do an extra outreach to the immediate neighbors to inform them of the availability of community outreach in the future. Thank you.
So we do all of this prior to opening, and then it continues as we are there.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing,
my understanding is that these are all required of every new shelter. The community advisory board is required of every shelter, and it starts running as soon as the shelter is operational. Is that right?
That is correct.
Let me just add to Michael's question. One of the other things that we do, other than just the community advisory boards, is the management staff in particular, make a real effort to go out to the local businesses, and meet with the businesses. It could be in some cases daily, weekly, monthly, so they can build a relationship and a rapport. But if there are, and I'm sure there are in Soho, and we'll begin to learn that over the course of the next few months, associations or community meetings that are held, we do participate in some of those meetings at other sites, and we're more than willing to do that here to, again, foster that relationship with the local community.
Thank you.
And with the precinct as well?
Absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but yes.
Thanks. Coral, you have another question?
Yeah, my other questions were more sort of like outside of the operations, but more on, I saw that you have a stop work order on the site, and I was wondering if you could tell us why you had that and where the drawings are, if you've applied to landmarks, and what the status and timing is of your contract. Have you and Liberty One already finalized the contract? Because it's also my understanding that the site has actually been rezoned through the end of the year and would have a much greater ability to be a different facility. So I'm wondering if you all have actually finalized that contract. anything you can tell us about those, because it was just sort of striking to see the stop work order, and it had sort of a lot of violations. I don't know if those are related to yours or something prior.
Yeah, I can't speak directly to the stop work order. I will follow up with the developer after this call and circle back to Susanna.
Okay.
You know, as I said at the top of the meeting, I'm not sure if you were on at the time. I did speak with the developer last week. He's currently going through landmark and environmental reviews, which has delayed the project. And in terms of what you just mentioned, rezoning, I'm not aware of that. Again, the developer is taking the lead on everything that needs to happen for the building to become operational. And then we take control of the building once all of that is done. So I'm not privy to some of the stuff that you're mentioning, but I will look into it.
Okay.
Let me ask a couple of process questions about this. Is it my understanding that the developer takes care of the property and you lease the property from the developer?
We will lease the property from the developer, and then we have to go through a bidding process because we don't do the maintenance at a lot of our facilities. So we go through an RFP process and a bidding process to bid the actual maintenance of the facility out, whether, you know, the housekeeping and the general mechanical services of the building.
And
But
what
yes,
about
we
in terms
lease it from the landlord.
And what about in terms of your contract with the city? Have you guys already been awarded a contract? Does payment begin with that? Where does that stand?
We are, DHS can, you know, I'll ask them to chime in, but we are pretty far along in getting to a registered contract.
I think sorry.
I was gonna say they've been absolutely selected through our competitive RFP process. And we're working on that contract, which is moving well. Payment doesn't start to flow though until clients are in place.
And so along those, I just had two more. Sorry, it's Coral again. That was one of the concerns about Liberty One having the maintenance contracts awarded to its other businesses of David Leviathan. So we would definitely want to, ensure that that's not a something that happens again if it caused concern and issues in other locations. So that would certainly be, whether if it's on price or anything else, it obviously raised a lot of red flags at other locations. And then
I will just chime in that the city oversees the subcontract bidding process fairly closely, and that's actually someplace where we've really been ratcheting up oversight and auditing, as Jim mentioned. Not specific to Westhab, not specific to Liberty One. This is something that we're doing system-wide, but there will have to be a competitive bidding process for the maintenance and operations.
Okay, and then this question is for you too, Molly, is per person in the current budget, what would be the allocation per individual per night in such a facility? So per dollars, I think it was like 130 or maybe 230 per night last year, but this year, do you know what the number is?
I actually, I'm sorry, don't have the per diem for this particular site off the top of my head. For single adults
Right here.
system-wide, it's 100. Oh, sorry, somebody.
I'm sorry, Yvonne, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Go ahead, system-wide.
These are numbers from the mayor's management report. The single adults average, I believe, something like $137 a night. That includes some older facilities, and doesn't account for differences in real estate. So I would expect this one to be a little bit higher. Again, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but we can circle back with the estimated per diem. Given that we are a couple of years out from actual opening, the number won't be final for a while because wage rates change, water rates change, other things.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that most of that money is actually going to help the individuals and not going for some investment process. And so it would be very good to be able to have that broken out.
And also, you mentioned the mayor's management report. So would that be a resource for people who'd like to know more about city spending on homelessness?
Absolutely. If you Google mayor's management report and go to the drop down for DHS, it's published. There's a final report comes out in the spring every year, and then a preliminary report every fall. So lots of data about DHS, lots of data about everybody else's services as well. It's a terrific resource.
Right. I'll take William Benish's question, and then I'd really like to move to the public.
No, oh, sorry. Coral actually asked what I was going to ask. I mean, it says in the Times article again that Levitan had sort of inserted into some of his leases the requirement to use his own maintenance services. So
we require a bidding process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So actually, I'm looking, we're going to go to the public now. I will start with Harvey Macadon. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. You are unmuted now.
Yes, hi. Thank you for coming. I was a little sorry that you didn't have more specifics in terms of what your plans are, including the change in the entrance, which was a big discussion that we had here last year with Westhab. And it seems like starting off the discussion with that wrong set a tone for really not having any detail. And the other point I'd make is that while I understand Mrs. Park's suggestion that there are people who do well in congregate settings. I'm a physician. I've worked in many different kinds of settings. I remember when I worked at Presbyterian Hospital in New York in 12-bed wards. I don't think that there were people in the wards helping other people in the wards when they had medical problems. It's done by staffing, and staffing is increased when you have smaller rooms. But nevertheless, there are very effective ways to do it. And I think people have much better outcomes. So I'd like to echo what other people have said, and that it would be very important to have data on who really could benefit from this kind of setting, because I suspect smaller settings monitored either through better staffing and technology, as is done in hospitals, where patients are monitored in single rooms all over the United States now, because it's been shown that large rooms are not very helpful in facilitating people getting better and getting out of the hospital. And I think that we should really look at data like that before just hearing anecdotal reports from the providers or from discussions that have happened about why you think congregate facilities are best.
Thank you. Hey, Adam, I'm going to ask you a favor. Can you find the mayor's management report and put it in the chat while we're doing this? I'm sorry?
I'm on it.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thank you, Harvey. We're going to go to Jack Palacho. Sorry, you're unmuted now. Jack, you need to unmute yourself. Jack Palacho, talking permitted. Are you there? Good. There you are. There you are.
Maybe sorry you said that. Help me. No, I'm also a physician and I'm a psychiatrist. I have had a lot of experience earlier in my career hospitalizing mentally ill patients. I have questions about the intake. First of all, I know how difficult it is to help somebody in a hospital and to follow them to health outside of the hospital. And I think everybody's trying to make that successful. There are some caveats here that I wanted to point out. One of the things that I'm interested in is more information about the intake. Who does the intake? How experienced are they? How do they triage people? Who goes to a mental health facility? Who needs other kinds of help, and so on and so forth. But the other thing I think about when I think about treating people in the hospital was a terrible thing that we noticed when I was at downstate Kings County. We had a psychiatric hospital, was the revolving door syndrome. I mean, people would come in, we would treat them. I opened a day hospital at Kings County, and we would have them come in every day and get very intense treatment from all sorts of services. It was probably a 8-to-1 kind of staffing ratio. And we would help them get into a good situation outside a halfway house, and then they would move on into the community. This was the gold standard, but it didn't always work. We had a lot of revolving door patients. They would be back because they would stop taking their medication, and they really didn't have anybody to help them continue to do that.
So I want to ask a question about that, Jack?
The question is, how it's impossible in I'm asking a question and also posing a dilemma. And the 200 resident facility is really impossible to wrangle and to control and to deliver any kind of health care to all sorts of people. And it really promotes really a revolving door syndrome. It sounds like a money grab to me. I'm sorry, but the more people that are treated, the more the developer makes. It's pretty clear that throwing lots of bodies together will make a lot of money for someone. Otherwise, people, and I think that it's been said in various ways in this. I'm not saying anything anybody else didn't say. So what is,
thank you.
Is it possible for us to get a better staffing situation and fewer people in our facilities? Or are we going to continue a process that doesn't work? Okay.
Thank you.
People is deciding small.
I'm going to ask you to wrap that up. Okay, thank you, Jack.
So let me start, and then I'm going to ask my colleague Yvonne to talk more specifically about the intake, because I think that was also a question. So first of all, I just wanted to clarify, in a 200-bed shelter, it's not one giant room with 200 individuals. There's dorms. The Westhab team can speak to the dorm size here. We do have 200-bed shelters elsewhere in our system. Westhab operates 200-bed shelters elsewhere in our system that do have very strong track records, because at the end of the day, this is about person-to-person interaction, where everybody is meeting with a caseworker, everybody is meeting with a housing specialist. People are facing a variety of different needs. Certainly not everybody is coming in with serious mental illness. This is a general population shelter, so it's going to be serving a variety of clients. So I think I really can point to the track record. Again, hundreds of households who are getting placed every single week into permanent housing. For those who need, and we really seek to come up with an individualized housing situation depending on people's individual needs, right? So somebody who does have a higher level of need, we are going to look for a supportive housing placement. Somebody who is a little bit more independent, right, is going to might move out with a city HEPS voucher into a private sector apartment. So, and there really is, I don't see the money grab argument. Every piece of the budget is reviewed by DHS, Office of Management Budget, the Comptroller's Office, Mayor's Office of Contracts, and everything operates on a reimbursement basis. So, so that there really is no option for creaming money off of the top. And in addition to the review of all of the invoices, right, that nothing is paid except on a reimbursement basis, there's a quite extensive post-payment audit process as well. So I'm going to stop. I want Yvonne to answer the questions about intake. Yvonne, I know it's not exactly your department, but I know you know it better than I do.
Okay, and I apologize. I'm having difficulties. That's why I don't have video. But when you come into 30th Street or either one of the female shelters, you have regular case managers that have degrees. They might have a degree in social work or liberal arts and stuff like that, and they will do a basic intake, basic demographic information. They put them in the system. There are medical contracts in place at our intake and assessment sites, and those medical contracts include, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psych NPs who will do the psych evals. They do the medical workups. So it's very, the psych evals and the medical evals are really comprehensive. They do blood work. They do, TB testing, all of that stuff. And they do a very thorough, medical process. The assessment that they do for mental health is not your comprehensive assessment, because I know that, normally when someone goes into a mental health hospital or they're seeking mental health services, it takes 3 to 4 visits before you can actually diagnose someone with a real, serious diagnosis, but a lot of it is self-reported and what that client reports to us, and any collateral information that we can get from family members. Some of them come in already with services outside of the shelter. They have their psychiatrist that they're seeing once a month. So they will bring in their psych evals, they will bring in letters from their primary doctors who can verify that they're in treatment, what their medications are, what their diagnoses are.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Michael Lawley. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, I'm now unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think I heard from Molly Park a couple of times that a lot of the services are contracted out. And I think something that was said at the beginning of the call was that with the exception of the land and the building, which is at a market rate. So a couple of questions around that. I think a 200-person shelter is the biggest in the city, maybe by a long shot. I don't think.
No. I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you. Just clarify that for us, Molly. My understanding is it's not the biggest currently in the city, but it's now the biggest that's permitted under new guidelines. Is that right?
Correct.
So
Okay.
There are older shelters that have more than 200 people, but they're no longer new shelters being approved that have more than 200.
Okay. Sorry, so I misspoke. So
no, I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's helpful. But so the largest that's currently permitted. So,
correct. But not this would not be the single largest. This is
okay.
200 people is the largest model that's permitted.
Let's say large, right?
Yes, that's fair.
Very large. So if the real estate is based on market rates for the land, I just question why Soho. I think that's a legitimate question as a taxpayer, but also if we as a community and a society have this money to spend, wouldn't the homeless men, the clients, get more money if it was done at a less expensive locale? I think that's a logical question.
So that's a logical question. It's one of the biggest issues about fair share throughout the city.
And then I have a couple of other questions too.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to try to be concise with them, just because DSS is having a difficult time with time, and we don't want to lose those people.
Okay. So I'll just be quick, and really just a comment for the community board and the neighbors that Mr. Coughlin said on an earlier call. I had asked, I think, on one of the early calls about the recidivism rate, and I think Mr. Coughlin said it was 11%. So I'll round down to 10%. Could be higher, but with a 200-man shelter, at any given time, that's 20 men that are likely to be recommitted to prison. And so, as a father with children on the block, to have 20 people that are likely to commit crimes statistically, that really concerns me. And I don't think the private security force that are probably low paid or minimum wage are really going to do much about it. We have windows, people can get into the apartment, we're on the street, and I just think the safety issue has not really been talked about a lot.
Thank you for that. The safety issue is a primary issue. I think it's actually been raised by the public many, many times.
Yeah.
Do you want to address anything more about that, Jim? I mean, or maybe it's just feedback for you to have. One of the most important concerns that has been raised by the community in the 2 meetings that we've had has been concerns about security. People are worried about, their kids, their family members.
Well, and just the point that even 1 or 2 people that are likely to commit serious crimes and go back to prison is not comforting to me, but 20, it's just a really big number.
Michael, let me just say, I don't remember ever saying anything regarding recidivism, regarding criminal activity and people going back to prison. Like this is not a jail, and these aren't individuals who are, you're sort of making the assumption that everybody at this facility is going to be formally incarcerated, which is not accurate.
I strongly suspect that we're using recidivism in different ways, that we're talking about placements from housing placements from shelter into housing and individuals who return to shelter, because for single adults, that number is about 10%. A fairly small minority of the DHS shelter population overall has ever been in the criminal justice system. Not none for sure, but certainly not, you know, anything close to 100%. So you know, recidivism, criminal justice recidivism numbers like you're suggesting are just sort of not mathematically possible.
So you're making a distinction when the term recidivism, when used by you guys, means recidivism to shelter or to homelessness, not to criminal activity or to incarceration.
And that's certainly language that we can tighten up, because recidivism is certainly a word that's associated with the criminal justice system, and it's probably too pejorative for our clients. I wanted to jump in on the why Soho. There are people in the shelter system from every single community board in New York City. There are not currently shelters in every single community board in the city. And in fact, Manhattan Community Board 2 does not currently have a shelter. So we are placing, you know, it has been a priority that we are locating shelters in every single community because this is a citywide issue.
Thank you. I want to comment on that as well. We have 4 shelters now in the pipeline, 2 safe havens and 2 shelters that would be the result of placement. One would be this one for 200 single men, and one would be a shelter for women on West 11th Street for 90 women. So the total population, once these 4 are up and running, of the close to 50,000 people in the shelter system every day, we would have 290. So it's just in terms of understanding scale. I'm sorry, we have about 7 or 8 questions and I want to get through them all. I've just been given an alert by DSS that they have a little bit of a time crunch. So I'm going to just ask people to be concise with your questions. We don't have a timer going, so I'll just ask you to just be concise with questions or comments. And we'll start with Amy Durning. You are now allowed to talk. So
yeah, last time we were on, we were told that we could not know the other shelters in New York that Westhab operates. And therefore we can't look into the communities where they currently operate. And it's nice.
Yeah, I can address that because that's an ongoing.
I'm just gonna finish.
Oh, sorry.
I'm glad you've invited CB2 to go see them, but I'd like to know if we can somehow have more communication with the places where you're already operating. I'd like to know how many you're operating in the city and what boroughs they're in, and whether you do this while DSS is on or not, Valerie. I'd love to know more about the run of day for the clients. How many do you expect to be employed? What are they doing all day? My understanding was that there wasn't drug counseling on location. Will they be going somewhere for that? Other than the psychiatrist, is there any other mental health support on process? I'd like to know more about how people are spending their time and what is expected of them.
Thank you, Amy. I'm sorry to have interrupted you before. These are all really great questions, and I don't think that we should answer them now. I think they're going to take a little bit more research, but I will be sure to address this when we write up a report on this meeting, and we'll follow up with Westhab and get that information. What I was jumping in to say was that unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, the locations of shelters are private, and my understanding is that that is a result of state law, the state social services law that requires for the protection of clients that their addresses not be revealed to the public. It's frustrating for us who think about fair share and where things are located. We have a map on the CB2 website that has a distribution by community district, but we're not allowed to share more more information than that. But thanks, Amy, for those questions. We're going to move on to Terry Valenti. Go ahead, Terry. You need to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I did not have a question. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Stephen Miller.
Hi, thank you.
I'm a resident of Soho, and I guess I applaud the city in its efforts to try to, improve the quality of life and of housing for homeless. I guess, as a resident of Soho and a taxpayer, I just question, the economics around this specific site. And it seems to me like the number 200 seems to be pegged at the fact that it needs to be able to balance a budget, and not really around some of the concerns and questions that have been raised here about the number of homeless at the site or the resources that will be available to them at the site. And so I guess my question is, how much is this decision around the number of people at the site and the resources and what's available to the surrounding community is simply tied to the economics that you're trying to build a site, which is obviously important for it to be across the city, including in CB2, at a site which maybe is extremely expensive, like many other residential sites in Soho. Nothing in this area of the city is affordable. And so is that in itself a challenge? Because I just find it difficult to understand how, on a per person basis, this could be equivalent to many other areas of the city or even other sites in Soho where you don't have to redevelop and go through LPC.
Thank you.
So certainly developing in Soho is more expensive than developing in other neighborhoods. I think that's part of the reason why there has been no site here previously and why there are heavy concentrations of shelters in other neighborhoods. But it is for equity purposes, and because there are people coming to the shelter system from every neighborhood, we do think it is important and to actually and consistent with fair housing goals to site shelters in every community. So I think that is that. Sorry, I think that's. I said that before, but I say it again because I really do mean it, and it has not been. It's something that we as a city thought really long and hard about how we can best serve equity.
Is it fair to say that the reason that this shelter has 200 people versus, let's say, 100 people is because just economically it makes sense that way? It can't be done otherwise?
I think there's a variety of issues, and that is a piece of it. It does allow for a rich service model. It allows for making maximum use of the site. I do remember what else I was going to say. I mean, you talk about construction. Really, virtually all of our sites involve some level of construction. Our goal is to never take housing off of the market to turn it into shelter. That's really counterproductive. So we are almost always either building or adapting something that wasn't previously used for any kind of residential use. So construction is essentially inevitable in our world.
And I think it's also just in terms of the economic question. I mean, it is fair to say that of the four that we now have, the four shelters that we now have in the pipeline, 2 of them are safe havens. One on 231 Grand Street would be for 90 people. The one on West 14th Street would be for 24 people, but those have individual rooms, and those are also expensive properties, I mean, relatively. So I guess that the economic picture varies as well. We're going to move to Laura Tannenbaum.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I first want to say that I did send written comments into the committee, and I don't really want to repeat much of what I wrote, but I do want to preface this by saying that we do have a terrible homelessness problem in the city. It's a crisis, and it's largely based on how little affordable housing there is. It's not because of much of anything else. The shelter being proposed isn't a drop-in facility, and that's a good thing. But it's not good enough. I really feel I would welcome it if it were supportive housing for fewer people. I think that's what's needed. I think that this is just warehousing more than anything else. I do have some questions. And one of them is that according to city limits, there were only 43 people from Community Board 2 in the city's shelter system. That number seemed awfully low to me. And I wondered if they could, if a DSS could give a little bit of the demographics of the unhoused in community board 2, how many people they are, the basic demographics of that.
Wait, let me just interrupt you. Are you saying the 43 people on unsheltered homeless or in?
No, they actually said 43 in the shelter system. It's just off.
In community board 2?
Yeah, that's what it said.
We don't have any.
No, not sheltered in community board 2, in the shelter system citywide. In other words, one of the policies of under the, I assume is still continuing, is to put homeless in their neighborhoods. And so I'm wondering how many homeless.
I see.
According to that, there were only 43 in the system whose neighborhood is community board 2.
I see. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so my question is, what's the actual numbers? What are the demographics that are involved in here? Where are these men are going in through the intake system, but are they originally coming from our community or in the area near us?
That's a fair question. Let's get an answer to that question.
Let me just ask my questions first, and then we can get to both of them. And how much supportive housing is really needed by these guys? I mean, I just really would love to see them live in dignity, and I don't see how this congregate housing gives people dignity, or a real way to eventually have independence, or if they can't have independence, have the real supportive permanent housing. That's my question.
Thank you.
So we prioritize placing people in the community from which they came and prioritize borough beyond community. That's not, and also look for ways that we can accommodate anybody's special needs, right? Somebody who has a doctor nearby, who's employed in a particular neighborhood. We do that wherever we can. We also have.
We know what you do, but what are the numbers?
So 43 sounds really low to me too. I don't have that statistic right in front of me right now, but that's something, Leilani, that we can circle back with. I was just going to say that I don't, the people from the area are prioritized for the shelter. It is not an absolute guarantee. We do have a legal mandate to house anybody who needs housing, who needs shelter. So, if we are in a situation where we have a client who needs to be placed, who is appropriate for the site, we will do that even if they are from another borough. I am a big cheerleader for affordable housing. I came from the affordable housing world. I really do believe that that we need shelter, high quality shelter and housing, because people face emergencies, right? People walk into 30th Street 24/7. My phone comes to bed with me every night, Yvonne's phone, Cindy's phone, right? Because there are emergencies that happen around the clock. And people need a place to come in, to stabilize, and then transition to permanent housing. Permanent housing is always the goal, but we need both. We are, as I very much hope we can get to a place at some point where it is much more of an or, but at this point, given the demographics of the city and the number of people who are extremely low income and severely rent burdened, we need a strong functional shelter system.
Thank you. Let's move on to Constance P. Constance, do you want to, I don't hear you, but you don't look like you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to follow up on that. I was at one of the meetings last year for this. I think most of us are aware that there's a huge problem with people struggling to pay rent. But I have to comment on the fact that last year you admitted that part of this population, or maybe a significant portion of this population, would be coming from Bellevue and closing prisons in this state. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get through this question. I'm confused as to why people that are being reintegrated back into society are not being sent to their neighborhoods. That's my first question. The other question I have to ask, and this is related to public safety. Someone else asked about the typical day for a client here. I would actually like to know, and that's a general question for DSS facilities, DHS facilities, and this one, because my understanding is that facilities that kick residents out during the day, or that many residents are kicked out during the day, they then go into the surrounding neighborhood. Those that are not in school, that are not employed, that have no place to go. At all of these meetings, there is legitimate concern about security for residents and surrounding businesses, and DSS doesn't actually offer anything to neighborhoods around these facilities.
So let me chime in. I think there's a couple of really key miscommunication points, and I'm sorry about that. And let me see if I can clarify. Bellevue is the building where single men's intake is located. So yes, everybody is coming through Bellevue, but that is not Bellevue as a health institution. It is Bellevue 30th Street men's intake. So I just want to sort of frame that out from a vocabulary perspective. Are there people who have had mental health histories? Yes. This is not a mental health shelter. It's a general population shelter. The same way there are mental health diagnoses in the general population of people who aren't experiencing homelessness, there may be some people here. As Westhab noted, there will be healthcare on site. Same thing there, maybe some people who have had experience with the criminal justice system, but it is not a shelter that is targeted to that population. And overall for the DHS system, it is a fairly small minority of individuals who have come through the criminal justice system. So I think that was one piece that I really wanted to clarify. The other on it was DHS policy years ago that the shelters were closed during the day and people had to leave, but that has not been true for some time. People will absolutely be able to stay on site during the day. I know we were sort of skipped over the question because of time, but Valerie, if you're actually able to talk a little bit about what a typical day looks like, I think it might be.
Well, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Just to stop you quickly, there's no actual way, it seems, for people to actually verify that these are members of even this neighborhood or Lower Manhattan that are having their needs met here. There's no way for us to verify where people are coming from.
So we do, let me tell you, we will prioritize people from the area, from the community district, from Lower Manhattan, from Manhattan in general. It will not be 100%. I can, almost guarantee that, even though it doesn't do me any good to say that. But we, are placing people 24/7, and we look for site. We have to meet a variety of people's needs, right? We have to meet their geographic needs. We have to meet their, what program shelter type is the most appropriate for them. In many cases, we have to deal with proximity to work or doctor's offices. We might have to address accessibility concerns. So we have a combination of factors that we're taking into account, and frankly, availability. So we have to take all of that into account when we make a placement into a program shelter. So while we will be prioritizing people from the local community, it almost certainly won't be 100%.
I apologize. This is the last question. I'll be quick. Just to use examples that other people have given, if all of these services and something like antipsychotic psychiatric care, if that's voluntary, I guess that's what I'd like to know. What if it is this voluntary, and where does that leave residents and neighbors of the shelter? That's a big concern that I'm hearing over and over again. The psychiatrist that, asked the first question brought this up. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I think in short, we explained that this is a general population site. When individuals come to our intake system, if that's captured in information that's captured, if the individual is presenting, any kinds of mental.
Whoever's unmuted, can you mute yourself, please?
In short, we will make the appropriate placements for individuals who are experiencing mental health challenges. So we have the ability, Westhab has the ability to reach out to DHS. We have a program administrator on the line, George, I believe his last name is Fernandez. Yes, who will work with Westhab staff, and they can make internal transfers to an appropriate shelter placement for individuals who starts to present, maybe that site may not be the best setting. And so they have the ability to make transfers to appropriate shelter setting that can best accommodate those individuals. But this is not a mental health site. This is a general population, a gen pop site. And so folks come in through points of assessment, intake and assessment. We assess thoroughly. They meet with clinicians. We have caseworkers who will engage individuals, and we try our very best to make the appropriate placement. So we do have mental health for sites throughout the city. And so we have the ability to make placements there. So just to reiterate, this is not a mental health site.
Great. And also I love that we now have a new piece of jargon, Gen Pop. That's a new word in my vocabulary.
Sorry, general population.
No, I know what you meant. I just love that I can now say
So
Gen
used to
Pop.
writing it.
Michael Lawley, and that's actually our last question.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Lawley, you can speak. Unmute yourself, please. Can you, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Michael? Michael, are you with us? I'm going to move on. We have one more question. Alexander, who did I just?
Hi, can you hear me?
Alexander Adler. Yes.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much. And I realize that there's no good place for any of these things, and that people should not be in this position in the first place. But kind of to summarize, nobody on this call has been able to identify why this is a good idea for anyone involved. Like, there's not a single great beneficiary of this project. The neighborhood's incensed. We don't have anyone who's obviously a client or potential client. There's no green space here. The building's a disaster. So where are they going to shop? What are these people going to do, with their free time? And that's not saying that I don't want them loitering on the street, but I'm just trying to figure out, and I hope someone just has an idea to clarify, like, who really benefits from this besides the developer? That's all I have to say. And again, thank you all for coming here, Westhab and DSS. I know you don't have to. And Susanna, thank you so much for putting this together.
So, I like it. It's a good, challenging question. Who's benefiting from this, guys?
DHS, the city, has both a legal and moral right to house those to shelter those who are experiencing homelessness. I think we've heard a lot of people say, shelter isn't the end goal. And I agree with all of that up to a point, right? I think it is incredibly important that we have a system that serves people in a moment of crisis, because those moments of crisis exist. I grew up in California. I go back and visit family periodically. California is not a right to shelter state, or doesn't have right to shelter cities. And there are places that frankly are appalling, because there is just so much street homelessness, right? New York City has taken a more compassionate, more client-driven approach. And that means we have to have the shelters, right? So the shelters are there. This shelter and other shelters are there because we need this basic emergency kind
Molly,
of service.
Molly, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't mean the shelter system in general. I 100% agree with shelters, drop-in shelters, all that stuff. I'm just trying to figure out why this is the best idea for a shelter or a facility for these humans and for the taxpayer and for all the component parts who make up the businesses and all the component parts that make up for the city. So that's all that I'm asking. I agree that shelters need to exist, and they absolutely should. And the DSS is an extremely important thing. And right now, you guys have a hell of a job to do, and it must be horrible every day. But I just want to ask, why this particular facility, when there's so much in terms of an uphill battle with converting it, with environmental, with just everything. So that's what I'm kind of curious about.
I've yet to see an easy shelter, unfortunately. As I say, because we don't want to take housing off the market, that would be counterproductive. Everything involves construction, everything. And, New York City is a heavily used set of land. So even when we are doing new construction, because we do build, there's environmental assessments and environmental remediation that's needed there too. The communities that are with more expensive real estate and less of a shelter footprint raise one set of objections to shelter. Communities that have somewhat less expensive real estate and have a larger shelter footprint raise a different set of concerns. So,
never easy.
It is never easy. Our principle has been that it is important to site shelters in every community in the city, and that's what we're doing here.
Thank you. Will Benish?
Yes, I'm sorry. And I know this has been discussed a little bit, but I just want to be 100% sure I understand sort of the economics. And Molly, I think you mentioned that it's a reimbursement model. So you're paying a certain rate per night per individual in the shelter. Is that right? And then that rate is influenced by the average or median rent in the surrounding area. Is that a correct assumption, or am I misunderstanding?
Sort of. I mean, we absolutely talk about per diems, but in fact, what we do is, there is a budget that where we ahead of time are looking at, and I will say we are not finalized with the budget on the site because it's still a couple of years out from opening, or 18 months to 24 months from opening. But we budget looking at a per diem for different, but when it comes to actual payments, Westhab has to show us their invoices, for what they paid, right? So if trying to come up with a, good example, right? If, we base the budget based on, for example, 100% occupancy. If the shelter is 90% occupied over the course of the year because of the ebbs and flows of population, we aren't going to pay for all of the expenses for 100% of the expenses for 100% of the year. Some of those costs are fixed. We're not going to ask Westhab to furlough staff because they're down 10% of their population, but we're not going to pay for food, for example, for people who aren't in shelter. So although there is a budgeted per diem, at the end of the day, the payments are based on the expenses that Westhab actually incurred.
Got it. Okay. And one of those is rent, though, so that the rent is probably influenced by, the rental, the average or median rent in the area.
Yeah. So before, fairly early on in the process, we do look at rents and to make sure that a site is something that we can proceed with. We look and make sure that the rents are reasonable given the market. We understand that Soho is a different market than, say, South Bronx or East New York that have historically had more shelters. But again, given the equity principle that we are adhering to, the city is prepared to pay rents that cover that.
Okay. And is it disclosed yet what the rent is going to be that Westhab's paying to the developer? Do we have that number or no?
I don't know. We'll circle back with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, as Molly said,
We're
we're still in the contract process. So we'll get back to you with that number.
Okay. So guys, that's it for all the questions that I see. We're gonna go into business session now, and I'm gonna close the chat. So anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment in the chat, I invite you to do that immediately. I will read the chat tomorrow. I don't follow it during the meeting, and I'm gonna close it down now. We're gonna go into business session, which means that the members of our committee only will be allowed to talk, but everyone else who would like to listen in is welcome to do so. And thank you all for being here, members of the public, members of CB2, and I really want to thank our panelists for coming. We've delivered some hard questions to you, and you've been very gracious in answering them, and we're grateful for your time. And we also recognize that this is not the last time we're going to meet on this topic. So we're sorry. We hope we haven't worn out our welcome with you.
Thank you for
right,
having
I'm
us.
gonna,
Thank you.
and good night, Leilani. Good night, Molly and Valerie and Jim and whoever else.
Thank you.
is left.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Our
Good
committee-
night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. And our committee is going to stick around. I'm now turning off the chat. And I just wanted to get a feel for all of you and what you think about this. I mean, so if you like, I'll start. I would like to write a report, but I would also like to put some requests in it, perhaps in the form of a resolution. I'd like, you know, I get that they haven't, they're much farther out than they were, you know, than we thought they were. I'm not comfortable with the fact that they haven't done any outreach, community outreach. I now get why they haven't done that, but I want to make sure that they do that. I want to make sure that we get some answers on meeting with their partners, and so that we can get a better sense of what they're like as operators. I just want to know what everybody else feels about walking out of this meeting, and if there's an action that we want to take. You can speak freely. There's only 8 of us.
All right, well, I have my hand up. I guess you don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't think we should take any action at this point. I don't think there's a need to. And if any action we took, I think mine would be one that's not in favor of this moving forward at this point. I think by us endorsing something, we're maybe championing a shelter that is not necessary. They don't even know the vacancy rate of what they expect this to be. We don't know the cost of what it would be, both to the taxpayers and in terms of the dangers and other ancillary effects of this shelter. If a shelter is going to be put forth, maybe one that's not 200 beds, maybe something that takes an approach that's different, maybe one that actually recognizes the population who their servings desire, and that's for individual rooms there. So I guess if you're asking, you know, guidance from me, it would be a demand for answers. And the only resolution I would kind of sign my name to was, heck no, not unless you answer these questions, at least at this point.
And will you share with me some, well, you don't have to do that now, but maybe what some of those questions would be?
Well, I think I just iterated some of them, but we've just heard them come up during this. First of all, they don't even know what I don't know what preparation they did for this. They didn't know, or maybe it was just a misspeak with regards to the location of the door. And like one of the people who spoke to, I'd want clarification on certain points. What is the population? They're saying, oh, we'll have 8 people at a certain point. Is there a need? I think Mr. Zeldin was talking about a little bit about, you know, is this the best thing? What is I guess they call recidivism rate. I don't like them using that term. They also call the main congregant area in the room, the day room. That's also another name for prison, which might speak to, you know, kind of the backgrounds of some of these people in this population. I think we have to be very careful before we start inviting people from outside of CB2 to come into CB2, and then maybe potentially endanger people in the area, or certainly affect the property value of those who were here first. I think we got to be sympathetic to those people. So I would want to know the vacancy rate on the different shelters that Westhab does. I'm not even sure about who this developer is and what their success rate is outside. I don't know why they're inviting someone from Yonkers to come down and open a shelter with no history of success here in New York. That seems a little queer to me. But I guess we're all just trying to figure out 1,000 answers to 1,000 different questions before we sign on.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Bill?
Yeah, John touched on it, and I think it goes back to the main complaint that I have had and others have had. Anytime we are trying to get answers for any shelter, is just like the opacity of like the whole process. and how there's so many things where there's not the data there that we would want, or if it is there, we can't get access to that data, and there's all these roadblocks. And it's not like, we talked about it for 231 grand, there was an opacity on the fair share. Here, it's not so much a fair share issue, it's just all the other data in terms of the success of the model, what other models look like, how the RFP process went, what the rent's going to be, how the reimbursement works. I just feel like it's like almost we don't have enough info to like write a full resolution, because there's just so much data we can't get access to, or at least we don't have it yet. So I really wish that the process were more transparent, that there was more data shared with us. And so that's how
we might be able to get some of that. So that's,
no, I know some of it, it's out there and we just don't have it yet.
Yeah,
or they don't have it yet. Some of it though, some of it we won't be able to get for sure.
And jumping back in on what Will's saying, on Grand Street, we didn't have the luxury of time. This is the exact time that we should have and demand the answers, because they can't use the excuse of, oh, there's not enough time to provide you the answers. They got well over a year and a half.
We just have to determine what our questions are. Rachel?
I just want to go back to that question of, is this the right building to build? I mean, I'm not convinced that people want to go into congregate housing. I've heard them say over and over and over that it's not safe for basically mentally ill people who are in danger of either overdosing or committing suicide to be left alone. But they shouldn't be there then. They should be in a mental health facility. I don't see a reason for having a congregate shelter for housing homeless people who are not mentally ill or not severely mentally ill. So I would like them to examine their process more, so they could give us answers of why this shelter, somebody else said, why this shelter here and now. I can see yes here because CB2 has no shelters, but let's look at, why can't we look at a smaller shelter or a single room shelter? And why is that not feasible?
Thank you. Ryder?
Yeah, I think I have a similar set of things that are front of mind. And I just kind of, to step back, I do think maybe a report and questions is the right thing. I don't know if there's a right resolution to be writing right now, but certainly I would agree that, the things that are sticking out to me are not about the need for additional shelters. The number of unhoused single adults in New York is up 91% from 10 years ago. And until we, make a serious effort to bring down rents, like we have to be planning for additional folks to not be housed. So that is not something that I am that interested in kind of saying why more shelters. Also, why here is not something I'm that interested in kind of foregrounding. But I do think why a congregate model and the questions that Will raised about, the specific concerns that we might have with modes of operation and reimbursement and so forth are live questions. But for me, the question I am most interested in is, why are we not moving away from a congregate model when a private model seems to have so many more benefits in terms of, long-term stay rates and self-reported quality of life rates amongst folks who are in the shelter. So, I think the reason for the congregate model is one of economic exigency and the need to house all these people who are unhoused, not actually a, outcome-oriented perspective. And so that's what I'd want to press on. And I don't think they answered my question, which was like, at this point, is there an opportunity for this facility to move in a more private direction? Is there a shift to the level of congregateness in this shelter that is on the table between now and when it opens? And that's where I'd want to push.
Thanks. So I'm going to offer my 2 cents, not as the chair, but as just a member of this committee. I was really impressed by something that I had never thought of before tonight, which was when she said, the vast majority of homeless people do accept placement in congregate shelter. And I had really never thought about that, because there's so much in our sort of casual lexicon of these are warehouses and these are slums and, these are ghettos and they're horrible places and no one wants to be there and everyone wants a private room. But when she pointed out that, 15,000 men are accepting a congregate shelter, 50,000 people a year accept congregate shelter, or what's mostly the congregate shelter, it was a different a viewpoint for me. I like, Ryder, I will take the pulse of everybody here. I tend to agree with what I think I'm gleaning from everybody, which is let's write a report, not a resolution. The resolution wouldn't be opposing or supporting this shelter anyway. It would really just be asking, it would be trying to give some more muscle to getting some questions answered. But I think that we can do that with a report, and we can do that with follow-up. I'm going to read everything after tonight, and I'll try to incorporate everything that I can. And obviously we'll all dialogue, so happy to include any other thoughts excuse me, that people have. It's interesting that we're a year and a half out, so I think that we'll just take advantage of that and try to get as familiar as we can with the city's need for congregate shelters, why congregate shelters here, and what is the contracting process, what are the economics behind this, and all that kind of stuff. Will, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I agree, Suzanne. I was going to say, I just think we literally don't have enough info to write a resolution. I could see one down the road, but we need to do a report with the data and info that we would like to know, and hopefully they can come back to us. And then I also just want to say, just in general, I think it's just a little disheartening to me to see that. I know we can't change the way the system's set up, but it is kind of sad to see that, this is basically going to enrich a developer who already has done some unsavory things. And I know we can't stop that, and it's not really, we can't necessarily change that, and the system is what it is. But it seems almost like this site is like perfectly designed to maximize cash to the developer. And maybe it's just a coincidence, but like, you take a site that is probably the cheapest site you can find in a very expensive area, and then you renovate it for the lowest cost possible.
You guys, just be careful coming inside.
You put in as many people as possible into that site, and then it's profit maximizing almost. And I'm maybe that's just a coincidence, but it seems like almost like if you were drawing up a way to maximize proceeds as a developer, then this is how to do it. So
well, I gotta figure, any developer who is, who's renting space to the city, or to a not-for-profit that's in contract with the city. It's everyone's doing it for profit. Unless you're a not-for-profit developer, or unless you're a community-based organization that owns the building, you're doing it because, the same thing with a hotel that everyone was talking about in Chinatown. If that hotel was going to be profitable as a hotel, they would be using it as a hotel. I think that they would lease it to the city because that's the best way they, the most money that they can make. My concern with Westhab actually has been a different kind. I recognize the need for shelter. I certainly recognize the need for shelters in our district. My concern is just what they're like as an operator. And I not to cast aspersions on them. I have no reason to doubt everything that they say to us. But I don't know much familiarity with them. Not that I'm an expert on housing, homeless shelter operators, but we have not seen any engagement from them up until now. I now know that it's because they're much farther out than they thought they were. So I'd like to really push them to do the community outreach that they say they're going to do. I'd like to really push them to introduce us to people who have partnered with them so that we can have a sense of what they are like as an operator. We've heard too many news stories about shoddy operators. And I feel like if they are good operators and they deliver on what they have promised to us, then fine. I just want to make sure that what they have promised to us is what we're going to get. Rachel, and I'm sorry to Michael and to Anthony, but we're not going to take comment now from other members of CB2. We're just going to stick to our committee. But if you have any questions offline, you're welcome to send me an email or text offline. Rachel?
I thought they offered us a tour of their other facilities. Did they not?
They did, yeah. So that's a really encouraging development.
I think it would be good to take them up on that.
Absolutely.
I'm unfortunately out of town at the moment, but
We have plenty of time.
I'd be happy to go when I can get to it. If you'd like to go, I would be interested in seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So great. So we will, I'm going to take all these comments home with me. We will press them on their record as operators. We will press the question of the economic equation and other questions that are not that John has raised that I'm forgetting right now, but I know are in the transcript of this meeting. So is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? No? All right, then we will adjourn the meeting, and thank you all very much for being here tonight. And it's as always great to work with you guys. And let's see if we can, figure it now that, wait, one more thing. Since Ryder might not have a primary until August, we can actually plan to have a cocktail get together in June and have a better chance of getting together with him. So
I think the assembly primaries aren't moving. I know I'm probably not supposed to talk about this, but
right,
I don't think my election day is going to change. Still, we should do something.
Okay, and actually I realize this is not really an offline conversation, so we'll save another conversation for later about our get together after business hours. Thank you all very much, and good night, and have a lovely time.
Thanks.
Thanks to everyone else who listened in.